2, 3, maybe a fourth. They're coming at him, he's beat 6 and 7. Tom DeMarcus has beat an 8.
Oh, wow.
No.
Well, welcome to the SuperCoach365 podcast. Tail between the legs a little bit to start this episode. Heading into round 2 on the back of a brutal, a bashful round 1. Tommy, not the start to the season that you and I were after.
Good day, Ryan. It was a tough start. But I think the saving grace is every other podcast I've watched, every other post I've seen on Twitter about SuperCoach in the past 4 days, it's been the same sentiment. Everyone struggled, really. The scoring was a lot lower than it was for most of last year. It was a shock to everyone's system. So I think we just dust ourselves off and go again this weekend.
It's all we can do. That's where we'll start. I think, look, we've had some pretty strong opinions in the off-season. I don't change my perspective on those a hell of a lot, but I think we need to start today with a little bit of an apology to the Newcastle Knights. I think it's only fair, given the way that they played at the weekend. I mean, we saw our teams late last week. We put up our teams for round 1 on Thursday. We'll continue to do that throughout the rest of the season, but I stacked my team full of Roosters, and I couldn't really expect to be in any other position than the one I'm in right now on the back of that performance by the Chooks, and as well as that by the Knights. I think I'm almost going as far to say that I owe them a little bit of an apology.
Yeah, perhaps we do. I did not see that coming. No way at all. I think even last week when you revealed your team, the one thing I wanted was more Roosters. So yeah. I'm very glad I didn't go down that route. But I also probably owe an apology to the Dragons. I tipped them for the spoon and they looked okay the other day also. But yeah, good efforts from the teams that we've kind of put the mock on.
Maybe we should do the reverse now and say the same about the Roosters this week, and then they'll come out and blast Manly. Roosters are getting the spoon this year. You've heard it here first. I don't think anyone else has said that. So, no, let's move on. But from that, of course, a big part of that was James Tedesco and the way that he played. He was captained by a lot of people last weekend, myself included. I don't know if you did in the end. I think you certainly swayed that way. You did, as you nod down the line. He had us cheering very, very early. We thought, how good's this? We're off to a flyer. And sure enough, it wasn't to be the case.
Yeah, it was a false dawn. I looked like a great start, like you say, a nice try. And the Roosters seemed to be playing okay that stage, but it turned after that, didn't it? There was that disallowed try, obviously, and then Teddy knocked on for the Knights' first try. So it went downhill fast. Do you think if that try's given, we see a different game?
I think we do. I think it's a different story then. I liken this back to my own experiences. No, I've not even played anywhere level close to the NRL, but anyone who's listening to this, we've played sport in some capacity, I dare say. You rock up to the field, you think you're going to win, how many goals, how many tries am I scoring today, and suddenly you put under a little bit of pressure or things don't go your way, and how quickly things fold or they change. And I think the Roosters, maybe they rocked up with a mentality, and they've been listening or reading the papers in the off season. They're the premiers. Everyone's got them as the premiers this year. And suddenly they rock up and things are a little bit more difficult. And it just didn't turn out that way. And credit to Newcastle, really. I think it's the surprise result of the weekend.
Yeah, definitely credit to Newcastle. But I really do think the Roosters killed themselves on Saturday. A lot of their knock-ons and penalties, they really didn't give themselves a chance to win that game. And, I think Trent Robinson after the game summed it up. He said a lot of their best players hadn't trialled, and it really looked that way. So I'm sure they'll be back with a vengeance after that result. But it wasn't the only upset over the weekend, was it? We saw probably an equally bigger one on Friday night.
Yeah, if anyone, and we'll get to our tipping section very, very soon, but before we get into that, I mean, if you've tipped anything beyond 4 games this week, you're an absolute genius. And the next game you mentioned there, obviously the Broncos beating Souths at the weekend. I think that's maybe even a bigger upset than Newcastle, because I feel like for the much of the off-season, probably not a bigger upset. It's probably just below that, actually, in hindsight. But it's very, very close in terms of South's heavy favourites. They head into this one. They made the grand final last year. Suddenly they roll up to Brisbane. And much like we say with Newcastle, Broncos just turned in an effort. And in the end, effort was too good.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us were probably sitting there just expecting, as the game went on, South to just click into gear and that left side to start firing, but it didn't really happen. Mm-hmm. And I think Brisbane played really well. They were really gritty in defence, and it was a real war, that game, and they come out on top. And Payne Haas, if you're in a war, there's no better soldier to have than him.
He's the general, and he leads it all, doesn't he? And for a long period of time, I think he played 70 minutes or maybe even more than that, but close enough too. And We had our captain's call, our post on our Instagram, our socials on Wednesday or Thursday last week, and he was amongst that list alongside some big names like Trbojevic, like Tedesco. And in the end, the workhorse, Mr. Reliable, I think I called him the safe option of the weekend. He would have been exactly that, and good on you if you found Payne Haas amongst some of those more high-ceiling players. Just a general comment on the rules at the weekend. Did you notice anything obvious, the impacts of the 6-again changes and maybe how that played into the hands of these teams that were towards the bottom of the ladder last year?
I do think it was a little bit slower than last year, and I think that was obviously going to be the case with the rule changes. I don't hate it personally. I probably thought the game was a little bit too wild last year. We still did see a wild game on Sunday after between Para and the Gold Coast. So it probably is up a lot to the referees' interpretation of the new rules. So, it's a watch this space, but definitely a little bit slower, I think.
Let's just recap the results from round one here. You see it on your screens. Thursday night, the Panthers, as impressive as always, 28 points to 6 over Manly. Your Raiders, Tommy, beat my Sharks, asterisks over my Sharks, but 24 points to 19 in a gripping game, one of the better games of the weekend, I thought. The Broncos, too good for the Rabbits, as we say there. The Knights trumped the Roosters against all odds. And then the team that you said at the start of the podcast here and throughout much of the preseason, the Dragons over the Warriors, 28 points to 16. Melbourne doing Melbourne things, coming from behind to beat the West Tigers, who were brave in defeat, 26 points to 16. A high-scoring affair at Parramatta on Sunday afternoon. A great game for the neutral, who loves plenty of points, 32 points to 28. And then rounding us out, arguably one of the tougher watches of the weekend, the Cowboys and the Bulldogs. If ever there was a wooden spoon preview, that might have been it.
Yeah, it wasn't the greatest way to end the round. It was quite an interesting Sunday. You had the points fest in the afternoon and then a more dour game in the evening. It was still entertaining because it was close, but the quality was probably lacking a little bit.
Now, before we get into Team List Tuesday for round two and all of the implications to come out of that, we'll just recap. Obviously, a big part of our preseason content was around our overall group and people getting behind that and the tipping as well. Let's throw up the top 10, I think it is here, of our overall group, and those who managed to find plenty of points at the weekend. Congratulations to you. You see it here. If you haven't already joined this, it's not too late. 576-855. Find this under your leagues, then add us as a group. This is the SuperCoach listeners' $500 first prize, free to play, courtesy of Top Tippers, and great to have their support this season. On the topic of tipping, Tommy, and we'll quickly flash this up as well. We mentioned how hard it was a result to make sense, or how hard the weekend was to make sense of much of the results. And see here, credit to the top 5 here via the Top Tippers app. 17 point something points, I think they're the top score, and that was just phenomenal. I think I ended up on about 2.5.
Yeah, I was the same. It was a terrible weekend for myself. I actually do know the leader, Gadlad, and Gaddy's name is, so well done to him. I think he played one of his bonuses, so it's held, but
yeah, right.
Still a good score to start the year, and it's his to lose from there.
Yeah, no chance. No, absolutely the opposite of that. It's never too late to join, and given you mentioned the bonuses there and all of the fun add-ons of the Top Tippers app, you're never dead and buried. So never too late to join. You might be a week behind us, but again, a great prize there up for grabs. The Top Tippers prize there, another $500, courtesy of Dean and the gang, doing a great job. Before we get into round two and everything to come from Team Lists, as we say, don't forget, follow us on socials, subscribe to us on YouTube if you're listening to this on the podcast. I encourage you, get on over, put up with Tommy and I's heads for 50 or 60 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, because you'll get plenty of other content on your screen, which goes a long way to helping you make sense of what we're talking about here on the podcast. Tommy, let's get into it. Round two upon us, round one now behind us. Team List Tuesday, first game of the week that we'll look at here, one of the better games on paper. The Melbourne Storm and the South Sydney Rabbitohs kick us off. Some big team news for the Storm. Talk us through it.
Yeah, huge team news for the Storm. Obviously, Munster is back. He's been one of the most hyped players probably in the off-season, given what happened at the end of last year. There's a massive boo on him. Even the coach is saying he's a new man. So he is hoping he is. A few other changes in the front row. Harry Grant is back. So 2 massive ins there for Melbourne. But they had some big injury woes last week, didn't they?
Yeah, and their captain, newly appointed captain, Christian Welch, confirmed that he'll be gone for the season. So don't expect to see him anytime soon, which is a big loss. I mean, you look at the players they let go in the off-season, and Welch would have been tasked with filling much of that forward void. Obviously, lesser names that have left, but he was obviously left to carry the burden. That won't be the case now. So then these older statesmen in Bromwich, Jesse and Kenny both, and then these guys, Felice Kafusi, even their experience, it's going to be called upon time and time again this year, you'd think. Brandon Smith, again, we talk about hard luck stories from round one. That was right up there in one of the first tackles of the game. Brandon, a popular pick. He was in my team, managed just 1 point before his night was done.
Yeah, it's brutal for super coaches. I know a few actually captain him in draft as well. So pretty painful for those guys. Just looking at the Storm's team, do we think those injuries we just spoke about are going to have a massive effect on the season? We kind of think of the Storm as this impenetrable force. They'll be right no matter what happens. But just looking at that bench this weekend, Wishart, McDonald, Liero, and Maroa. To be fair, it's 4 names we didn't think we'd be talking about.
Yeah, and some of those names there we mentioned as cheapies that might get a go around Origin time, and suddenly they're going to be asked to play 40 quality minutes every week for a team which was, is supposed to be still challenging for the premiership. I think the added bonus and the luxury that Melbourne has that a lot of clubs don't in this position is that they're a club which people want to go to. Like, people will happily uproot their life to go to Melbourne to play for the Storm, and I think Craig Bellamy's maybe not the best poker player. If Tarek Sims isn't there in the next couple of weeks, or at least before that deadline, he says, have we been speaking to Tarek? Of course they have, and what a pickup he would be, an Origin level forward to come into that mould to replace a Christian Welch.
Yeah, I think he'd be a great signing, but I think they will go into the marketplace. Bellamy was pretty adamant on that. For Souths, the big story is in the fullback jersey. Latrell Mitchell is back. Well, that clicked them immediately into gear because they were a little bit clunky last week, weren't they?
Yeah, and a lot of that comes, you mentioned that left side of their attack and how good that is, and Johnston on the end of that, 99 times out of 100, and this time that Mansour scores that try. But Johnston, we know he's not a passer of the ball. He's a great finisher and he has speed, but Latrell just brings back that attacking style and what they need. They'll be improved this week, Souths, I feel, but Melbourne back at home for the first time in a very, very long time. Was this the first time since that Raiders game when, after the first COVID lockdown? That seems like an eternity ago now. So they'll have plenty to prove and lots to play for there. Just on the Storm, before we give some opinions on this one, some of their quality that was there on the weekend amongst, Harry Grant and Brandon Smith being injured, Munster out as well. Their big names in the 1 and 7 stood up, Pappenhausen and Jerome Hughes.
Yeah, Hughes especially. I think he scored over 100 points. It's probably one of the performances of the round. And look, all in the off season, I said if Cleary was out, I wanted Hughes, and then silly decision in the last second not to go with him.
Yeah,
I think maybe a few super coaches made a similar error, but it was definitely one I'm regretting now.
Yeah, and I think I said it again. I had him second behind Cleary, and obviously DCE and Hines are in the conversation. I landed on Walker at his price with his goal kicking. What looked a great fixture against Newcastle, maybe too short-sighted because now, of course, we'll get into our trades a little bit later, but Hughes, you'd be happy to run him from now onwards, really. You look at the Melbourne draw from rounds 4 to 10, it really opens up, and if there is one man that could maybe push his price to anywhere near in Cleary's stratosphere, it looks like it's Hughes. He's got that high ceiling, 100-plus points at the weekend. So, yeah, definitely an error on our part there. Well done if you managed to find Hughes amongst all of that. What about Ryan Pappenhausen? Tommy, he didn't goal kick as much at the weekend. He might have had one shot in the end. If he didn't, a lot of that fell at Nick Meaney's feet, but he's not there this week. So it looks a win for Paps and a win for Supercoaches.
Yeah, Pap's owner's very happy there. I think most people probably expecting Meaney to be the replacement winger for George Jennings, but Dean Eremiah's got that role. So, yeah, Pap's owner's winning out there, and he should add some extra points to his tally for sure.
On this game, might save our tips in their entirety to the end, or at least we'll recap them at the end. But tell us here, Supercoach matchups you like. It's probably be hard not to favour the Storm given what we saw last week back at home. Munster back, it all sets up nicely for them, but it may not be as easy game for the Storm, as you say. They've got plenty of outs.
Yeah, I do think this will be a lot closer than the market is saying. Obviously, TopSport currently have the Storm $1.39 with a line of 8. So they're kind of suggesting it'll be somewhat of a comfortable victory. But I don't know. I think Souths, after last week's loss, unexpected loss with their probably favourite son returning in Latrell Mitchell, I think they'll be very up for this game. And I'm not saying they're going to beat the Storm, but I really think they'll give them a run for their money. Big game for Lachlan Ilias, I think. A lot of people own him in SuperCoach, obviously, as a cheapie.
Yeah.
Not saying he played poor the other night, but he really has to, take control of a few of these early season games to cement that spot.
I think you look at who's running at who this week. Jerome Hughes, obviously, great start to the year. You mentioned Ilias there. They're going to throw plenty of traffic at the young kid. I think in Nathan Cleary's debut game, this was 16, I think. He debuted against Melbourne in Melbourne. So Ilias may be stacking up a little bit to that, one of the formative games of his career. I think Cleary made 36 or 40 tackles in that game. So they're going to ask Ilias to do a hell of a lot of defence. And then you look who's conducting the attack. It's Hughes, it's Kafusi, a veteran, and outside him, Remus Smith. I think that they could be in for a long night down that side. So if you're playing anytime try scorers for the Storm or SuperCoach and you want to make a little shift down that Storm right side, I think you could do worse options than to look towards Remus Smith this weekend. Otherwise, I guess the big in and the question that will pop up, it's continued to pop up in our Instagram stories and our DMs. We'll get to a couple of these later as well. Do we go straight swap Brandon Smith to Harry Grant? It's a little bit more of an outlay in terms of cost, but in terms of the ceiling and longevity in this team now, Harry's position probably short up even a little bit more by Brandon not being there this week and for the next 5 weeks, we think.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad move, is it? I'm sure that'll be a popular option. I do think the only worrying thing to come out of the team today is the fact that they have picked Wishart there as a specialist number 9. Does that mean that we're going to see Harry Grant have a break at some stage, perhaps?
Yeah, and it's interesting they've gone him above Meaney as well, who Meaney probably covers. I know he played in the halves at the weekend. He definitely covers jerseys 1 to 5 on any other given day. So it looks like that they've put Wishart in for that cover around dummy half and maybe in the halves as well. But he certainly isn't, you wouldn't think, the mould of an outside back. So no, I agree, and that's the thing that stood out for me looking at these team lists as well. We won't spend too much more time on the Storm here, but I guess the big winner in Smith's absence you'd think is Josh King as much as it is Harry Grant, because he gets a good go at this number 13, and SuperCoaches who found him early in the pre-season, they're laughing all the way to the bank now.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that personally. He's my starting front rower, and I probably was a bit short-sighted at the time. I probably thought I was going to have to get rid of him after 1 week, but with Brandon Smith's injury, it's worked out quite well at his misfortune, unfortunately for him. But it's good for the people who took the punt on him.
Tipping, who you getting around this weekend, Storm or Souths?
I'll stick with the home side, but definitely happy to think about South at the line.
Definitely some value there on top tippers as well. I think you'll be getting about 3 points upwards for Souths. So if they can break that Melbourne hoodoo, which I don't think they can, but if you're playing the value, then Souths probably the way to go. Next game on Friday night, kicking us off, the Dragons and the Panthers, 2 of the more impressive teams at the weekend. And personally, I tipped the Warriors. I thought the Warriors probably had a little bit more to play for in this game. Sean Johnson back as well. But they were missing some cattle in Walsh and Lodge, which hurt them in the end. I think they just lacked that little bit of spark, and the Dragons, they showed plenty of that.
Yeah, spark definitely. Tyrell Sloan, God, he looks good, doesn't he? I was probably a bit gun shy to talk him up in the preseason. I thought he might just need another year, and with a lot of the young people in this team, I wasn't quite sure, but he looks a star, doesn't he? He looks ready to go already. Moses Sully looks quite immense. And then on the right side, Lomax and Ravalawa. It's one of probably the most underrated combinations in the game, I reckon, centre to wing. They're so good. Lomax just holds up the ball, flick past to Ravalawa, and he's a great finisher. I think I was wrong about the Dragons. I really do. But Penrith, you can take us through them the other night. That was one of the best performances I've seen in round 1.
Without Cleary as well, and I think we both tipped Manly with that in mind, that Cleary would be out, and how silly we were because, much like those great Melbourne Storm teams we've mentioned, the next man up mentality, that's exactly what we saw from Sean O'Sullivan the other day. I think he churned out 82 SuperCoach points, maybe more after recounts, and I've had raps on him. We've seen him play New South Wales Cup for Wyong in the past, and at times, when he's filled in for the Warriors in first grade. But he is a Panthers junior, and you saw after that game what it meant for him to pull on that jersey at his old stomping ground there. I was really impressed by them, and I think the standout for me, and maybe I was a little bit biased in this regard, I was heavily invested in Isaac Dungor in terms of SuperCoach, Classic and Draft. But, geez, he looks a real star for mine. I think he just got his hands dirty, but he's also got that touch of class about him as well.
Yeah, he showed glimpses last year, but yeah, he was a great first game of the season for him. Obviously, getting that try was nice for everybody. And then, yeah, he does look a first grader straight away, doesn't he? And playing in that back line, probably the best team in the comp. If you didn't own him before round one, you're probably getting him this week.
The only question is, and I mean, I think long term, we look back into the season, we probably want to be playing with the To'o, Garrick at some point, Travojevic, Cleary, these names that started last year. Is To'o hindered by Tango's presence on that left side? We saw what Burton could do at stages. Burton, not really a great tip-on man, loved to tuck his arm or the ball under his arm and go. We saw that in the grand final even when he found that hole. Probably could have hit Brian, but chose not to. To'o and Tango down that side. Tango even more of a back rower. We kept hearing that. He's a back rower turned centre. So maybe his first instinct is run. We've seen that from Penrith's left centre the past 2 seasons now.
Yeah, and there's a few centres in the game that are notorious for that, and they frustrate the owners of the wingers outside them. And Tyler wasn't that sighted the other night, really. Like, Penrith played great, don't get me wrong, and he has still had a solid game, but probably wasn't at his usual dominant standard at the start of sets and probably didn't get as much ball. So it probably is a factor that is going to have to be monitored. Just on the Panthers, we saw today Moses Leota's out for 8 weeks. Probably, I don't know if he was too relevant in SuperCoach, but I think there's a bit of talk Spencer Leniu is maybe a play for some people.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Eisenhuth actually starts and they do the switch on game day. Leniu's probably biding his time and he brings impact off the bench, whereas I think Eisenhuth's probably better to start the game. Could very well be wrong. Look at me last week, was wrong plenty of times. For the Dragons, in the same sort of mould, Frankie Molo comes into the starting side. Interestingly, Tarek Sims named in jersey 20. We spoke about him a little bit already, and apparently he was not too bad for the Dragons in New South Wales Cup the other day. They were badly beaten, the Dragons, but I think Sims actually played prop that day. So you mentioned Melbourne maybe needing to replace a front forward or a middle, then maybe he could be the man. You're tipping the Panthers here, Tommy, given what we've seen last week and 2021, 2020 even?
Yeah, it's hard to go past the Panthers. I do think the Dragons will give them a run for their money. I can't imagine Penrith being as up for this game as they were last week, being at home in the first game of the year and whatnot. But you would still think that their class will shine through. How about you?
Yeah, I'll be on the Panthers here. I think it's hard to look past them. Liam Martin looked pretty good, played big minutes. So SuperCoaches, I think that'll be a popular trade in this week as well. If people did have Brandon and they're looking to maybe sell off one of their other 2RF assets, Liam Martin could be a popular pick, given that he is playing down that right side that Cleary will eventually come back to. In terms of matchups at SuperCoach, where are we playing? I mean, just looking here, maybe you look towards Steph Crichton down the right for the Penrith. He looked really, really good the other day. Unlucky not to have a double early. He'll be running at Moses Sully, who maybe not the best defensive centre compared to that man Lomax, who we spoke about briefly there. That's a scintillating matchup, that one. Lomax versus Tango.
Yeah, Lomax versus, I think it's Tago. I'm pretty sure it's Tago, but anyway, we'll keep monitoring that. But then also Ravalawa versus To'o. So it's a great battle out there on the Dragons' right-hand side. Really looking forward to that one.
What about Talatau Amone before we move on from this game? Because I think a lot of people who would have had him, I've got him in my CTW slot at the moment. He scored 25 odd points. And the Dragons won well, you got to say. So maybe there would be that temptation there to shift him on, I think, because there's probably going to be some other players emerge around that price that you could get to. I don't know. I was a little bit underwhelmed by him, but maybe resistant to pull the trigger just yet.
Yeah, only one game, but you're right. Like, the score probably doesn't flatter him. And the fact that they scored 28 points, scored 5 tries, and they won the game, yeah, you probably expect more than 25. So I wouldn't blame people if they did want to maybe move him on.
Okay, let's move on. Well, we're talking about moving on to the next game. This one, the primetime game on Friday, blockbuster. 15th versus 16th. They'll all be tuning in, though, the Roosters and the Seagulls. Who would have predicted we would have said that about these two teams heading into round 2? But let me just put that on airplane mode. Roosters and the Seagulls. Look, what are we expecting here? I think it's almost cards on the table. I don't know what to expect, really, given what we saw last week. Manly actually probably played better than the Roosters, and they lost by a bigger margin. So sum that one up for me.
Well, they played Penrith, I guess. Penrith were amazing. I don't think Manly were that bad, really. I just think Penrith shut down Tom, they shut down Daly, and that was it, really. Manly probably their biggest two strike weapons. The Roosters were pretty terrible, let's be honest. They pretty much killed everyone's super coaches teams. I don't know how much improvement can you make in 6 days, because I do think they'll bounce back and they'll be a much better team, but they look so off the other day.
We mentioned already Tedesco's no try. I don't want to harp on it, but it was definitely a turning moment. You mentioned there the Roosters' impacts or the impact of that no try decision upon the rest of the game. I know it was very early, but I still feel that really killed their momentum and their run into the match for large parts of it. This is what James Tedesco had to say after the event and how he summed up the Roosters' performance, and he gave a little bit of a comment on that try as well.
Teddy, did it feel clunky out there at times?
Yeah, very clunky. Then we probably were trying very hard, and then we just have an error, and we just didn't build any pressure or possession down in their end. And as Robbo said, they were more ready to play than us.
Did you have a view on the no try after about 10 minutes, the disallowed try that you scored?
Yeah, I asked the ref. I don't know where Connor's supposed to go or what he's supposed to do there, so I didn't think he impacted the play. I mean, there's deliberate sleepers. You can tell that when they stop in the line, but Connor was behind the line. He wasn't involved in the play, so I didn't really. Yeah, I thought that was a try.
So Teddy thinks it was a try. Tommy, I think you think it was a try. I certainly think it was a try. But going forward, I think we're happy with this as long as they're consistent, because if this comes out and we see this week in, week out, where 1 week it's a try, 1 week it's not, it's just going to become a headache for coaches, fans alike.
Yeah, absolutely. I really don't see how that wasn't a try. I don't even think the Knights players protested it. So they were really just finding a reason not to give it. But it did change the game, like you say. Just on the Roosters, I will get into your trades obviously later, but how much forgiveness are you going to give them? I guess players like Keary and Walker, they look like they'd never played together. Well, I don't think they've played together in first grade, but you could tell they really struggled. Even Billy Smith, someone I was really keen on in the preseason, you could tell he hadn't played for a year. He was pretty ordinary.
Yeah, look, they were all ordinary. I think we looked at the numbers in the post game. They missed 35 tackles. That man Smith you mentioned there, he and Momorowski combined for 9 of those. So when your edge defence is just getting carted, really, they made Dane Gagai look like he was 20 years old and playing Origin for Queensland. I think Gagai, we said in the preseason, he had the worst patch of turf he was turning up to, and he had the second highest SuperCoach score of the weekend. So yeah, they threw everything out the window the other day. The Roosters, they left me deflated. And Teddy used that word clunky there. That's exactly what they were. How much do we forgive them? I think if you've got 6 of them in your team like I had, and I mean maximum you probably want to shift this week is 2. I don't think it's a horrible fixture. Manly conceded 28 points last week. So it's not like you're coming up against one of the premier defensive units. We saw last year Manly concede points even when they win. I think there's got to be that element of forgiveness. You've made your bed. You have to lay in it, I think.
Yeah, and I also think it was one game. At the end of the season, I'm sure the Roosters will still be in the upper echelons of the ladder. We're not going to be looking back at round 1 saying we won't remember this game really. So I don't think we should act too strongly upon it. Just on the Manly team quickly, I think Dylan Walker on the bench for Tolo Kula. I know a lot of people had him, including myself, and pretty I think you said last week it was a risk having him, and straight away probably wasn't the smartest move having him in as a cheapie. Yeah,
look, I agree with you, but at the same time, I feel like who else were you getting for that price that was playing? And he's probably only 1 or 2, maybe 1 injury away. I still think Walker adds more value at 14 than he does in the centres. Yes, he has that experience to play in the centres if they need him, but he adds something else through the middle which no one else at Manly can. That's including Cooler. So I think if Harper or Parker get injured, Cooler's in. Or if they are, conversely come out and concede 30 points this week to the Roosters, we saw Harper struggle defensively last year. Suddenly he's on notice. Just on the Roosters, before we move on, about the question, do we trade them out this week? It's going to be a big temptation of yours, eyes, everyone who's probably stacked their team. Just be persistent, be patient. Rounds 5 to 8, this is their draw. Roosters play the Broncos at the cricket ground, the Warriors at the cricket ground, the Dragons at the cricket ground, Bulldogs at ANZ, or Accor Stadium as it's now known. So, look, you may have to ride out this pain for 2 or 3 weeks, but do you not want to be playing with James Tedesco in your team for those 4 fixtures? I think particularly Tom was probably still bleeding cash a little bit at that point. Maybe his break-even stabilised slightly by round 6, 7. But Teddy still looks the one for mine. I still think, he's gone at 4th pick in the draft this year. This time last year, he's the 1st or 2nd pick. So let's just hang tight, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. One game doesn't make someone's career. He's been an absolute superstar, and he's going to be again probably this weekend. So I think everyone should remain patient on him. Just on the other man you mentioned there, Tommy Trbojevic, I really am pretty confident he'll score a try this week. I think he's $1.90 anytime. I just think last week, wrapped up by the Panthers defense the whole game, he barely saw any room. I don't think the Roosters have the similar sort of swarming defense as the Panthers. I can see him at least scoring 1 try. I'm not saying they'll win the game, but I really think he'll have a bigger hand in the game.
Yeah, plenty of this conversation in the pre-match, the Matt Nable, look at this bloke. It's all going to be about Tommy and Teddy. Let's bring up their numbers from last week now while we go on about this, because important we do run them side by side because everyone else will this week. But I want to say here, this is their stats from round 1, and a couple of these numbers in brackets you'll see here on your screens, particularly their averages from 2021. Run meters, pretty even there. Teddy 150, Tommy 157. Receipts, again, pretty like for like there, just 6 the difference, 33 to Teddy, 27 to Tommy. Tackle breaks near even, and Tommy, again, I think you say his line break there, and he had a try assist as well. I think he finished on 62 after recounts. He's an ankle tap away from finishing 100 plus. I think he was in space, and I can't remember who it was from Penrith who reached back and knocked him over. Could have even have been O'Sullivan. But I mean, that was the difference between us talking about Tommy as being, how bad is it we don't have him, or this week we finished the game, we breathed a sigh of relief, we're quite happy. The numbers there in the brackets, they're averages from last season. So already run meters down and receipts down for Turbo as well. So maybe that's the impact of the rules. We see it there. We can quantify it a little bit. But just on that, the battle of the big guns, the 2 number ones this week, Tommy, it's gonna sell tickets. Hopefully plenty of tickets at the Sydney Cricket Ground. But, we look forward to this individual battle. You've already got Tommy going over for a try. What are you expecting from Teddy?
I think he'll be bouncing back as well. I think both these teams, I know it's round 2 and it's not September, but I think both teams will be very, very keen to get a win. I don't know if team wants to start off 0-2. I remember this fixture last year. I think the Roosters absolutely smashed Manly, but I don't see it going like that again. I think it'll be a close game. Probably go with the Roosters just being at home and have some faith that they can bounce back after the horror show the other day.
Yeah, I don't think the Roosters can play much worse than they did the other day. And conversely, Manly can probably play a little bit better. Yes, they stifled the Panthers' defence, that is. But they weren't horrible, Manly. I think they just come up against a classy outfit that is going to be there on grand final day again. Anything else on this one before we push on to Saturday afternoon footy? Because, just looking at these teams here as well, looks like Hargraves will start again this week. Did he come off the bench last week? Takiaho certainly came off the bench, and he was really disappointing. Missed 5 tackles. Didn't bring that experience, that impact that they would have wanted from one of their senior men.
Yeah, just another who was down on form. I guess both Billy Smith and Radley had HIAs the other day, so you probably have to... There's probably an asterisk there, see how they get through the week, because they might be late scratchings. Yeah.
And for those who love their New South Wales Cup, you and I included, Tommy, Nafahu White crossed for a double, and Adam Kieran, he looked very, very good at that left centre role. So already Billy Smith may be on notice. Oh, before we move on from that, what are we doing? Why is Manu on the wing? Why is he defending on the wing? He's played his career in the centres, really a couple of games last year on the wing while B-Moz was out injured, but he's one of the best centres in the game, and he's defending on the wing, looking lost at sea.
Yeah, I have no idea what was going on there. I saw a Roosters fan on Twitter saying, Trent Robinson's just trying to complicate the game too much and put Manu in all these different positions, and probably agree with him. I think he should just be specialist centre. Just put him there. As you say, he's probably one of the best centres in the game. Just let him showcase that.
Yeah, and I don't mind in attack if he floats, like we saw with Tommy and Latrell Origin, and this is speaking of some of the biggest names in the game. Manu, could be that sort of player, I feel, in attack at least anyway. Leave him in the centres in defence. He's too good to move. Anyway, let's move on. Saturday afternoon, first game, we mentioned the Titans involved in a high scorer last week. Doesn't this one have all the makings of exactly the same sort of game? The Titans, the Warriors, 3 p.m. kickoff. This one's going to be at a hard and fast Cbus Super Stadium. I'm really looking forward to this one because I think there's going to be plenty of points again.
It does scream points. There was a few games last week I thought it screamed points and they didn't, but hopefully this one does for super coaches. I thought Toby Sexton was probably one of the performances of the round. He only got 61, but I really like the way he played. He's a great goal kicker. And I think with the few halves going down, particularly Sean Johnson for the Warriors, Sexton becomes relevant in Supercoach.
Yeah, definitely. And I know a lot of teams at the start of the year that weren't playing with Cleary. We saw it, you're doing our first, second drafts on the team picker to start the year. This is way back January, late January, early February. Sexton was a man that plenty had in their teams. If it wasn't Hughes or Hines, Cherry Evans, Sexton was the one, wasn't it? Because you mentioned his goal kicking there. How good is it? I hate this as well. You watch the footy and they talk up a player, how good is he? He kicks goals from everywhere. Billy Slater the other day put the absolute curse on him. Hadn't looked like missing a goal before that. Anyway, he sprayed that one wide. But no, Sexton, 61 points last week was very good. What about one of the bigger names in David Fifita? What did you make of his performance?
I felt like I didn't really notice him. I think he made one or two good runs. He got 60 points. It was one of those games where I looked at the Supercoach scores and saw he was on 60. I couldn't really believe it. Did you have a similar sort of scenario?
Yeah, he had a couple of late runs with a few tackle busts. I think encouragingly he played 80 minutes. That answers that question. And I think the fact that Fermor is starting on the left, if you're taking anyone off, it has to be him. And I think Fermor's a great player. I think he plays Origin this year with Fifita. But at the same time, I don't think you're not taking off David Fifita to put on Kevin Proctor. That's not winning your games of footy. So if you're in the business of winning games of footy, you're keeping him out there for 80 minutes. Great news for super coaches.
Absolutely, yeah. The 80 minutes is the big tick there, and 60 points when he probably didn't have the best game. That's another tick. Jaden Campbell was pretty solid the other day. Brimson is probably a big in for them this weekend. Will Smith didn't do a bad job, but Brimson's one of their best players. What did you make of the Warriors the other night? I thought they were one of the more disappointing teams of the weekend. I have high hopes for them this year, or I had high hopes. The Sean Johnson injury is really disappointing as well, but I just thought they had old habits last week. They defended poorly and they just floated in and out of games all the time.
They did, and I think there was a crucial part in that game there, 14 or 15 minutes left. They might have been only down by 2 at the time, and Johnson went for an easy option for the crossfield kick to maybe even Vallejo on that right side. They didn't get it, and I think soon enough the Dragons score soon after, go out by 8 and eventually kick on and win well. That was a turning point. Johnson not there. Not saying that helps their cause this week, but players like Walsh returning, Lodge returning certainly helps. Walsh, I'm big on him. We've said that in the preseason as well. I think he has a great year. I think he goes on to average 65 upwards, Supercoach this year. Lodge back. Does that clean slate at the judiciary apply to him this year? Because that's suddenly a real factor in terms of his Supercoach relevance. He's a great forward. We know what he can do on his day, but I think he's just suspended every second week, so that could be a real point for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't have faith that he's not going to get suspended in 2 weeks' time. It's a pretty hard man to trust, Matty Lodge. But I do actually like a lot of their fullback for Supercoach. Like Lodge and AFB are two great front row forwards. And then Aiken and Katoa. Katoa scored the other day, which helped his score. And I think Josh Curran, he's one of the most exciting players in the game. I love him at lock. I really like that move. One thing that did surprise me about the Warriors team, perhaps Nick Arima doesn't even make the 17. Ash Taylor gets the start against his former club.
Yeah, it's confusing, isn't it? Because if you think you're picking Nick Arima above Harris Tavita that first week to play in the 6, and suddenly he's not there. And Dallin's played fullback for the Kiwis before, so we know if they wanted to fill in the fullback jersey, they had an apt replacement in Dallin there. And someone like an Arthurs or a Rocco Berry maybe even shift, or Kossi could have went onto that right wing without too much trouble. So anyway, it's confusing. Nathan Brown known to make confusing decisions early. So if you're playing with your Warriors, maybe take it with a grain of salt, because they may be there one week and not there the next. Speaking of that, 2 of those names we mentioned, DWZ and Vallejo, also out for the Warriors. So rough start to the year for a team that's already going to be up against it, we think.
Yeah, disappointing for them. They do have a nice run of games. They don't play too many of the competition heavyweights in the early stages, so they might be okay. I'm thinking back to last week for the Gold Coast. If you watch that game against Para, they were absolutely destroyed on their right-hand side in the first half. Is Adam Pompey the Warriors' left winger? Because if he is, I'm pretty keen on him to score a try.
I think Marcelo will be.
Marcelo?
I think he get.
Well,
Yeah,
whoever is,
I think he's the left
load
side.
up.
Marcelo Montoya. Yeah, I think he'll be down the left. Interesting on the Warriors. Who kicks goals? Taylor's kicked goals in the past. Harris Tavita, a noted goal kicker as well, and now Reece Walsh back. So, again, this question about the Warriors, where the value is at the Warriors, it's hard to see. I'd probably still lean towards Walsh.
I think Walsh will get it. I think he was going to get it pre-season. But yeah, he's probably the biggest watch of the weekend for the Warriors. I know I don't have him in Classic, but I think he could be a good value option going forward. And if he can stand up in the absence of SJ, it'll be really good signs.
Just checking here, topsport.com.au, the over-under for the weekend, 47.5, which I haven't checked the other games this weekend, but I dare say that'd be very close to highest points of the round, and I think that's certainly higher than any game that we saw from round one as well. So sort of speaks to what we're playing there. If you're playing captains, or if you're vice-captain even, Fafita has to be an option. Sexton maybe even with the goal kicking. Yeah, I think wherever you look in this game, there's points on offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Fafita is a very decent captain option. Perhaps if you want to go a vice on a Teddy or a Turbo in the week, and then a Fafita maybe on the Saturday.
Beautiful. We'll get into our captain's call on our Instagram sometime either Wednesday or Thursday in the lead up to kick off the first game of the week. Moving on to the twilight fixture on Saturday afternoon. What an occasion this is going to be. Back at Shark Park, the Sharks returning to their patch of turf for the first time in a long time against the Eels, who would have been disappointed even though they got the 2 points last week.
It was a strange game. They looked really good in attack the first half. And then, I don't know, the second half, they kind of just fell away. I think both teams probably were revved up at half time to focus on the defence. So that was probably why. But a few big names in the team sheet here. Cameron McInnes in jersey 19. I don't know if he'll play, but it's good to see he's pretty close to a return. And then for the Eels, Ryan Madison is out, and that'd be pretty bitter blow to some Classic owners.
Yeah, and I mean, you're drafting Madison as well, probably round 4 or 5, thinking he's playing 80 minutes on an edge. Soon enough, he plays lock and he's gone after a week. He's always injury-prone, Maddo, and I think it's a contract year for him as well, so that doesn't do his chances of any good. McInnes, obviously a big watch. I don't think many people, I don't know his ownership stats as we do this tonight, but I don't think many people would have held him throughout round one, not knowing a time frame on his return. But in his absence, I thought Dale Finucane led well for the Sharks in that 13 role. He made more than 40 tackles, didn't miss any. And the young fella, Teague Wilton, we spoke about Wilton at stages last year, stepping into Wade Graham's position. He looks a real player of the future, Teague Wilton.
Yeah, I think we said last week that he would do a job for you. I'm not sure what score he got, but he played quite well. I think the Sharkies, they look solid. I think that game was a good game, like you said, against Canberra. I thought Hines and Moylan probably will take some time to gel together, but the signs were there. Players like Katoa and Ramian were probably a little bit down on form. They didn't get a lot of ball, though. So I'm expecting an improved performance this weekend from the Sharkies.
Yep. Hines obviously was a focal point in their attack. I think if you picked Hines in a draft league particularly and he scores 72, maybe you're a little bit disappointed. But, I mean, then you look at the scores churned out by these bigger names at the weekend. Kiri, we've already mentioned. Teddy didn't go overly well. And some of their opposition this week, even in Reid Marnie and Clint Gutherson, they played great footy, but they just didn't translate into SuperCoach results. So I don't think you can be overly disappointed with Hines' output last week, given what we saw from some of the other bigger names.
No, and I didn't walk away from that game thinking that he was a dominant player, and he still got 72. So yeah. I don't think it was a bad sign at all. Like you said there, Gutho, and especially Reid Marnie. Reid Marnie kicked the 40-20 the other day, and he seemed to have a good game, but then he only got, I think it was under 40 points. So that was quite concerning for those who went with Reid. I was keen on him until about last Tuesday, and I was quite happy I got off him. So I don't know if that's a sign of things to come, or it was just an off day.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, I checked the scores after. I thought Reid Marnie, given his high floor, for want of a better term, in his 40-20, he had a hand in that try down that short side early. I thought he would have scored upwards of 60, 65, and anyway, didn't turn out to be. Looking at this one through our topsport.com.au lens, any time try scorers here we like, any matchups we think we can take advantage of, and while you're at it, maybe give me a tip for the match as well.
Yeah, well, going back to that same game the other day at Bank West, or Combank Stadium as is known these days, the Eels' right side was absolutely torn to shreds. So possibly the Sharks' left winger there, I think Matt Ikevalu, am I getting that right? It would be. Katoa's there, right? So Matt Ikevalu, perhaps. Yeah, perhaps Matt Ikevalu. In terms of a result, I don't mind the Sharkies back at home for the first time in 3 years. They're outsiders, but I'd be going with them.
Yeah, I think they're going to have hopefully a big crowd down there at Shark Park, and those players, Moylan Hines, you've already spoken there. Their combinations with Kennedy and Brayley in the 9 can only get better the more that they play footy together. So, yeah, give me the Sharks here in, I won't say a low scorer. I won't say a high scorer. I think we'd probably see 4 tries to 3 or something of that kind this weekend in that one there. Otherwise, I don't think really too much else to speak of from that one. Interesting, Connor Tracy's still outside of the main 17, jersey 20. So back from his COVID complaint, you'd think, but still can't crack that side. We thought he would have had an ownership on that left centre jersey to start the year.
Yeah, well, we probably expected Ronaldo to be on the wing and maybe to not see Ikevalu in the side. I reckon he would be the first one to go. I've heard you and a few other Sharkies fans say maybe Katoa could be in a bit of trouble, but I'm not sure.
Katoa's just got that error in him, doesn't he? And I think, Mulatalo was a Queensland player up until Origin Day last year, and Ikevalu's defence, obviously Fitzgibbon likes what he saw in his time from him, or working with him at the Roosters. So anyway, Sharks in that one for mine. Let's move on. The next game on Saturday, rounding us out, the Cowboys and the Raiders. The Cowboys, where do we start with the Cowboys? I think I tipped them to win last week, 6-4. I know the conditions were testing, but geez, they didn't throw up anything last week.
Really disappointing, I thought. Like we saw the Roosters play poorly, but we know that they're capable of better. But the Cowboys, I don't know if they are capable of better than that, really. They weren't pathetic, but they just didn't have much in attack. I think Chad Townsend pretty much did what we thought. Still don't understand that signing. Just going to say that. Taumalolo is not the player he was. I don't think he played poorly either, but he's just not doing what Taumalolo used to do. So, yeah, they don't have a lot of strike power, and Canberra showed the other day that they probably do this year.
Yeah, I think they might have even surprised us a little bit, particularly Jack Whiten, the way that he played. Looked to be getting somewhere back to close to his best, and capped the game with a try. Yeah, I think you mentioned that word strike and spark there. Tom Starling probably doesn't do his chances any harm by getting back into number 9, and we know he likes to run the ball. I thought the back rowers were very good in Young and Harawira-Naera. Elliot Whitehead in a relatively unfamiliar position of lock even was very good. So, love the forward pack from the Raiders. What's doing with Tarpanay? Is he playing this week? I've seen he's in, he's out, he's unvaxxed. He's going to sneeze on Tamalolo. They're both going to get sick. What's doing there? Because it's a point of contention going forward. They've got an exemption this week, I think.
I think from what I've read, they do this week and possibly even games going forward in Queensland, which is pretty important because they're probably their 2 best forwards. So, and a lot of people probably look at them as cheaper options and definitely draft options. Just on the Canberra, Matt Frawley obviously at halfback, Brad Schneider out. Brad was good, I thought. 45 SuperCoach points, defended really well. I think he's a bit of a loss, but he'll still get back for round 3 and he should get a nice price rise.
Yeah, hopefully he's back sooner rather than later. And I think the fact that Ricky picked him first ahead of Frawley shows you that he's the top of the pecking order down there for as long as Fogarty's out anyway. Give me the Raiders in this one, Tommy. In terms of try scorers, I thought the Moko looked threatening at times last week, but we know historically Cole Felt loves to jam in on the Cowboys' right side. So Nick Kotrich may be in for his first try back as a Raider, I feel, in this game.
Yeah, I'm just big on Tomoko. I really have spoken him up, for 2 seasons now, and I think the other night he was brilliant against Cronulla. He set up that match-winning try. I like him going forward, even as a classic pod, or if he's in your waiver list in drafts tonight, pick him up because I think he's a really good player for the future. he beats his man almost every time. He's got an offload. Really good player, Matthew Tomoko.
For the Cowboys, before we move on, probably the shining light in that loss was Nanai. I thought he broke the line early. Townsend loves playing short to the back rower. He always looked threatening. I don't think I saw an offload, but he was trying to get the arm free. So going forward, Nanai, especially around that $350,000 quote in the Classic game, looks a real option. I think he's probably on a lot of waiver lists, as you say there as well. Chuck him in your anytime try scorers multi this weekend. You could probably do worse than that. Sunday afternoon footy kicks us off this game here. The Knights and the Tigers. I would have had this as the game as 15th versus 16th if you asked me in the pre-season. Not the Roosters and the Seagulls, but as we go to air tonight, this is the way it is. The Knights and the Tigers, two teams which impressed me last week, Tommy.
Yeah, I think obviously Newcastle were great to get the win over the Roosters, and even though Tigers didn't beat Melbourne, to lead the Storm for the majority of the game, I think that was a good effort considering they have, a new halves combination and whatnot. So, yeah, I actually think this will be one of the better games of the weekend. Newcastle, we've obviously spoken up a lot. I thought their halves were pretty impressive, especially Jake Clifford. I thought he played really well the other day.
Yeah, I looked at this actually post-game. We mentioned before in the Roosters Manly preview the amount of touches which Teddy and Tommy obviously had as a fullback and how they differed upon their 2021 outputs. I did the same for Kalen Ponga. I thought only fair. I'm not a Ponga fan, but I'll go back and have a look. Ponga touched the ball 53 times in that game. So 20 more touches in the game than Teddy. And I think Knights only had 52% of the possession. So it's not like they had an outlier and they had a glut of possession against the Roosters. But Ponga was just involved. He even had more touches than Clifford. So it just shows you that he is essentially, although wearing the number one, they're dominant playmakers. So interested to see if that trend continues in this game against the Tigers back at home.
I think it'll have to. I think, as we've said a few times, for Newcastle to go well this year, it's all on KP, and obviously Clifford and Clune have some ability, but Ponga is their marquee man, he's their star, so he's going to have to do it again. This game is sort of the game where you'll find out, I think, more about how Newcastle go this year. I think obviously last week they were good, but can they back it up, and can they beat a team that they're probably expected to in the West Tigers?
Yeah, team list, not too many changes here. A quick glance. No, it looks pretty similar. I guess in a good news for super coaches and for people playing the cheapies, Kelma Tuolangi retains his spot, and I guess the main threat to his left edge role, Luke Garner, isn't even in the squad. So a win there. Plenty of thumbs up around at Kelma Tuolangi this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought he was pretty good the other night. 71 minutes is probably the big tick. If he can, I don't know if he'll play 71 every week, but if he can play upwards of 60, it's probably good signs as a cheapie or maybe a draft option. As for the Newcastle cheapie, Chris Randall, obviously a popular pick. He played 63 minutes. Probably from what I've read, that's going to be his pretty much standard all year. And if he's playing that, he scored 47 with 49 base points. You could probably just bank on him scoring about 50 points every week.
Yeah, and what's his price? $250 thereabouts, I think, top of the dome. He's not losing money at that. He's break even, or his projected average to start the year around 29 points. So, almost doubling it. So, well, close enough to. Is he? No, 1.5. Anyway, back to maths class for me. In terms of try scorers, bets on the game, topsport.com.au, anything that you can find here for mine. It looks tough going. Because I think that some of the best performances from last week were the edges in Tuolangi and Leilua, and for the Knights, Frizzell. So I love backing an anytime try scorer in the back row, but I don't know which one of those three scores a try, but I'll say one of them will this weekend.
Yeah, not sure. Fitzgibbon runs a really good line. He's a good try scorer going on a weekly basis, really. The bet of choice for me would be the Tigers at the line. I thought this would be a lot closer than 7.5. I know Newcastle won the other day. They beat the Roosters. It's probably the win of the weekend, but I don't know. I just want to see them do it again. I think the Roosters were pretty bad. And I think the Tigers, obviously, having lost last week, they'll be very up for this game. So, yeah, I think it'll be a lot closer than what the market's suggesting.
This one's got a little bit of the feeling about it for the game for mine last year. I think I tipped the Knights in that game, actually. They were at home. They played the Dragons. And remember the Dragons, I think maybe the Knights had a couple of injuries in the game as well, but the Dragons came out, pressured them, silenced the home crowd. Tarek Sims, a late charge down, ran away with it. And this is the sort of game which, for mine, as you say there, it's going to set up the season for Newcastle. Either they are going to compete week to week, or they're going to be there one week and not there the next. And if they are beating the Roosters, really, they should be beating the Tigers, you'd think anyway. But, if leave me out of this one, I guess a couple of other quick points from the game last week. Kurt Mann, I thought, was pretty good. Plenty of touches on the ball as well. And for the Tigers, that combination of Hastings and Brooks, I think it's only going to get better. So, solid start to their pairing there in the Tigers halves. Let's finish it off with this one on the weekend. The Dogs and the Broncos. Another game that could have very easily been 15th versus 16th. The Broncos really impressive last week. They go away here to the Dogs, who are the complete opposite. I think very disappointing. And for mine, it's hard not to favour the Broncos in this one, given off what we've seen the last week.
Yeah, you'd have to agree. I don't think there's much between the Bulldogs and the Cowboys the other night. It was just really a lucky victory for the Dogs. But I do think in the Dogs, to their advantage, they have a lot of individual talent, which probably will come good. I think Dufty showed decent signs. Addo is obviously a great player. And Matty Burton was playing his first game for the club. So I think they have a lot of upside, the Dogs. But yeah, it's just a question of how long it takes for them to register it and find it.
Name you didn't mention, you mentioned him a little bit, but not too much there. Burton, his club debut, obviously, what do you make of him? I think it's obviously an uphill battle for him to find his way as a number 6 ongoing, but his kicking game was strong besides that one he put out on the full. I think they eventually got a penalty for it, so not too much harm done there, but different role in this Bulldogs team as the playmaker as opposed to the finisher on the end of a brilliant Panthers backline.
Yeah, it's probably what we expected. I think we both kind of said he's going from the best backline in the comp to, trying to steer around one of the worst teams in the comp. So it's a big change for him. But I'll tell you what, how big is his bomb? He has the biggest boot in rugby league. That bomb he put up in the first half, it was honestly ridiculous.
That left foot, I don't know where it hits on the ball. We should go down to the park, you and I, and try and practice it because it is just fucking incredible. Like, he just hits the absolute sweet spot every single time. Obviously, except that time he put it out on the full. But otherwise, no. Yeah, I think he'll come along. Avarello, did he score the try or was it denied in the end? No, I think it was denied. But again, he was pushing up around the ball. Good signs for him, I feel. Awkward moment in commentary. I don't know if you caught this. I think it was either Blocker or Brenton Speed. One of the two said Avarello went down injured and Flano was there next to them as co-commentator. and Speedy goes, they can't afford to lose their number 7. Their depth isn't that good, or something along those lines. Anyway, just something funny out of the weekend. The Broncos, what do you make of them? They welcome back their number 7 this week. It's obviously a big in for them.
Yeah, massive in. They were good the other day. I really thought South were morals, to be honest, to beat them. But they stuck in there and they won well in the end. They get Reynolds back, which is a huge in, possibly one of the biggest ins of the weekend. And then also Tessie New is back maybe a bit earlier than people expected in the fullback jersey.
Yeah, interesting to see that there's a Sarko drop out of the squad entirely. He does, jersey 23. I don't think he was horrible the other day. Obviously, I thought Pat Carrigan, aside Payne Haas, was the standout. Haas obviously doing Payne Haas things, but Carrigan, his first game back really in a long time, or at least he played a little bit of footy back into last year, but this was his real first hit out, I feel. Great output, 62 SuperCoach points, really doing what he did in 2020 en masse. Katoni Staggs was kept quiet. Now, this is my anytime try scorer bet of the week. Katoni Staggs, I think he's just ready to break loose this weekend. He could cross for 1, maybe even 2.
It's hard to argue, and he plays inside Cobbo, doesn't he? So that's just that's a hot side, isn't it, really? That right-hand side, whether or not Staggs can draw a man and pass or just go himself, I agree. That's going to be one to watch. We spoke about Payne Haas earlier. His performance was ridiculous, getting 91. Some of the numbers he produced was just amazing, and I think we all kind of said pick and stick at the start of the year, and he's absolutely justified that.
Broncos $1.80 on Tuesday night as we go to air, topsport.com.au. I'm not declaring them because I declared the Roosters and they lost at $1.20, $1.18 last week come kickoff. But that is the best bet you'll get this weekend for mine. Broncos head-to-head. Reynolds back. His kicking game alone will be enough to blunt this Canterbury side. I don't think that Canterbury can withstand the Broncos attack, which has these spark and these stars in it, like Staggs, Cobbo, Farnworth even, on an edge, Capewell, he's a noted try scorer. Ricky can break a line. There's just too many points in the Broncos for mine. The Bulldogs, they won't be able to contain them this weekend.
No, I like the confidence. I agree. I'll be on the Broncos, but just, I don't know. I've watched the Broncos enough the last 2 years to not be able to put all my faith in a team like that. That last week they were at home, first game of the year, big occasion.
Yeah.
They go away this week down to Sydney, ANZ Stadium. It's hard to get up for games there on a Sunday night. Sorry, at Core Stadium on a Sunday night. I don't know. I can see it being a bit of a dour affair, but yeah, put me out for Brisbane still.
Yeah, the atmosphere differs a bit, doesn't it? The Cauldron up against the Tin Pot down there. I shouldn't say Tin Pot. It's the Sydney, New South Wales Premier Stadium. But at the same time, there's probably going to be about, 4,000 people there. And that's if it's a sunny afternoon as well. Yep, Broncos for ours. And I think a lot of people will be going that way as well. All right, stick with us. We're going to have a quick break. That's our Team List Tuesday analysis. On the other side of this break, let's talk our SuperCoach teams and some trade action this weekend.
Having a bet on sport this week? Top this.
Whether you're into cricket and curling or golf and greyhounds, TopSport will let you on for plenty. And with literally hundreds of markets from your own backyard to the international stage, TopSport has you well covered. So if you want to get the top odds every time, bet with TopSport.
Top that. Download the app today. TopSport. Feel the excitement.
Don't let the game play you. Stay in control. Gamble responsibly.
SuperCoach365 podcast proudly brought to you again in season 2022 by TopSport. I forgot to mention this last week, Tommy. We banged on in the off-season about our SuperCoach365 Futures multi. It couldn't have got off to a worse start at the weekend. I think Storm the saving grace, beating the Tigers. If the Tigers won, we would have been about 0-4. Every result would have went against us. But Tristan sent me a message early last week saying that the Panthers stand to win more than $125,000. So, plenty at stake there for you and I both, and plenty of other at topsport.com.au punters this year. Plenty of markets up they do have each and every week. If you are having a play on the footy, do so responsibly. Do so with topsport.com.au. Tommy, let's talk some SuperCoach here now. While we do this, the last hour behind us. Let's start with your team this week. We're only going to throw up our trades. We'll confirm our final teams as we did last week on our Instagram an hour before kickoff on Thursday. But throw up your trades here now. Talk us through it. Your thinking behind these two here.
Yeah, well, the halves have been shaken up for me. Cody Walker was a late inclusion last week. He was, I don't know, I just really was confident he'd go well against Brisbane. He only got 29, so that was disappointing. All off-season, I've been really keen on Cam Munster. So I just think, why not start with him? Walker out for Munster in, save about 100K doing that trade as well. The other one was a forced trade. Unfortunately, SJ, he's made of glass. I love him, but he's so fragile. He's injured again, probably for a month, so can't keep him. Straight to Toby Sexton. Like I said before, I thought his performance was excellent the other day. He got over 60 points. They've got a nice game against the Warriors this week, so I think it was a bit of a no-brainer there. So they're my two trades.
Two questions I'll ask you. What's your thinking behind not doing a trade boost this week? It was obviously, I'm sure the temptation was there. And also those trades consolidating a bit of cash as well. So you're not only looking at this week, but maybe next week, the week after that even.
Trade boost. Look, I still could use it if something happens next couple of days, but I don't know. I didn't want to use it the first week. I very easily could. There's a few players, Billy Smith I could chop off. But the other point, I'm just wary I don't have either Turbo or Cleary. So I want to have a little bit of money there in case I want to get those guys in the next month or so.
Definitely a consideration, that one. And just on the trade boost, I think a couple of times we're going to be facing this. We're going to be staring it down the barrel this year of, do we pull the trade boost out? This week probably a little bit more tempting than most, because I feel like there's that urge, that need, that feel like we need to catch up to these higher scores. But as I was saying to you earlier today, we're only one injury or one bad captaincy choice from a lot of these others who are above us at the moment, and trust me, there's plenty of those, from catching them, from making ground. And I think the percentage on making ground this week is going to be greater and easier to make ground this week than it will be in weeks to come. So I get the want to pull the trigger early, but I'm erring on the side of caution. I'll throw my trades up here now as well. I'm not going to do that. Brandon Smith out for mine. In comes Jeremiah Nanai. I thought we've spoken about him already a little bit there. He impressed me. 56 points in, I won't say pure base because he broke the line, but he didn't score a try, which for mine was better than Tuolangi, which was probably the other option. Nanai played 80 minutes as well on the weekend. I won't say he's nailed on to that spot because they do have so many options there in the back row. Gilbert, Dunn, I think Taumalolo even played on an edge at stages last year. Ruben Cotter still to come back, but Nanai still looks the best of their attacking options in the 2RF. And the other one there, you mentioned Munster. Yeah, I'm going to Cam Munster as well. Trading out one of my Roosters, one of my many Roosters, Sam Walker. He has to go. 40 trades left in the year, and importantly, 5 trade boosts to go with it. And same sort of line of thinking as you there, $163,000. In the bank, a little bit more than that even. So, yeah, one eye on this week, consolidating, but also a bit of damage control, getting out one of the Roosters, moving towards Munster, who you look at their draw, we've already said, rounds 4 to 10, the Storm. It's tasty.
Absolutely, yeah. We said that early on this season, the Storm's draw really does open up. They've got a couple of hard games, I think Southland and the Eels the next 2 weeks, but knowing the Storm, they'll still probably go well in those games. How many Roosters does that leave you with now, mate? Like 10
16.
or 11?
No, only the 5. But I think, this, as I said at the start, you make your bed, you lay in it. And I think there's going to be a time and a point in rounds 5 to 8, particularly where people are going to think, fuck, I wish I had more Roosters. Just on that Melbourne draw, I know we've harped on about it without any real substance. Round 4, at home to the Dogs, which importantly will be Cam Munster's first price change. He could go down, but hopefully he rises. At home to the Dogs round 4, away, which looks at, I think it's just Wagga, McDonald's Park, round 5 to the Raiders. Then back at home against the Sharks round 6, a favourable game back at home against the Warriors round 7. And then after that, the Knights round 8. So a pretty good month there, I think, for the Storm, and particularly for Cam Munster as well, if he wants to make some cash heading into the Origin break. Tommy, before we wrap this up, now we didn't get to this last week because there were some troubles with our Instagram, but we're on now. Let's get into some of these fan questions, listener questions. I always say fans, but I don't think we really have any fans. Anyway.
I hope they're fans.
Only fans, no fans. Okay, let's start here. Question from Blake's Brushworks. Who else but Blake Moore to kick us off? Which player is going to have the most dramatic score increase and decrease this week?
Big
Toughy.
question.
Yeah.
Very. I'm going to say, just because he was so low last week, I'll say Teddy will increase quite a bit. It was very uncharacteristic score he had last week. And let's just say Ravalawa for decrease. He had 120 last week against Penrith this week. He won't be getting that.
Yeah, it's the obvious one, isn't it? Ravalawa against the Panthers for mine, the decrease. In terms of increase, I don't know. It's hard. One of the CTWs who didn't score last week, who scored a try this week. We'll go with that. Another one here, speaking of centre wing options, thoughts on Tyrell Sloan, a top centre wing option. We've sort of touched on it. In the preseason, we did say he was one of the better priced centre wing options, dual position as well. His involvement in that Dragons backline, you can't ignore it.
No, you can't. He's similar to Dufty, I guess, last year. He's getting his hands on the ball 3 times a set. So it was great signs. I don't have him, but he's one of the players that I'll be looking at the next couple of weeks if I need to.
Yep. Some here about Cody Walker, not questions, more statements, and I don't think we can read some of them out. One of them we can read out. He says, Brady Carroll, C. Walker is getting the flick. You've done exactly that. Munster, your pick. If you're not picking Munster, who else in the 5'8 slot? It is pretty slim pickings beyond those two.
Yeah, very, very slim. I just want to say on Walker, I'm not getting rid of Cody because I think he's going to have a bad season. I'm just more keen on Munster. I think Cody the other night, he's without Reynolds. He was without Latrell. Latrell comes back this week. I think we'll see a better Walker, but I just have a thing for Munster at the moment. I don't think Walker's going to go badly, so I don't really understand the abuse that we've received for Walker. But anyway.
Wow, this is our DMs. Imagine Cody's. I feel sorry for the kid. Okay, a couple of others here. Kai Kerbs, thoughts on Reid, Marnie to Harry Grant? Obviously, Harry Grant back this week. Reid played well without getting a big score. So thoughts on that? Obviously, you're going to have to budget that accordingly. But is Reid, almost like Munster, one of those players you get in, you don't have to think about getting them out?
Yeah, but just that score the other day was really concerning, like we keep saying. I don't know why he only got 40 points in a game which had 60 points total. So, I don't know. Harry Grant is probably the best hooker in the game, you could say, for SuperCoach. So if you have the money, it's hard to argue.
A couple of others here from Liam Champney says, B. Smith to Grant seems the obvious swap, but what are your thoughts on Tamalolo to Carrigan? And I think he says here, noting Cotter on the bench for the Cowboys. Cotter's back this week, I think, for the Cowboys, or still is he not out? Maybe he's got
Jersey
Cotter.
18.
Right, okay. Smith to Grant, we sort of mentioned that. Seems the logical choice, but again, the price discrepancy, 50K you're going to have to find to do it. So, we've spoken a little bit about Harry Grant. I don't think there's too many downsides with Harry Grant. Spoken about the Storm's draw with Munster, so he's going to enjoy all of that as well.
Yeah, another Storm player along with Hughes and Munster and Pabs who you could just pick and stick with, really. You could probably talk about Paddy Carrigan more. I know you're a big fan of his and you picked him up in our draft, which I was quite surprised at, but he proved me wrong the other night. He was really good. And
that's his first game of the year. Imagine him come game 6, 7, 8 when he's sort of had 2 months of fitness under his belt. I think he had 60... no, he didn't have 60 touches. He had... I think it was less. I think he had about 58 minutes. I think he'll get up above 60 at some point. He plays Origin this year. I have no doubts about it. I think he's a real leader. The only concern, though, Kobe Hetherington back on the bench this week for the Broncos. We saw him play 13 in the trials and played really well at the same time. So I still think Carrigan's the man there, and he showed he can do it for big minutes. Ryan James was also very good off the bench the other day for the Broncos. So... to answer your question on Carrigan, yeah, I love him. I think in terms of SuperCoach and what his output will be, he'll bring a lot to the Broncos as well.
Maybe you can ask Tristan at TopSport for a same team multi of Bo Firma and Pat Carrigan both making the Origin teams this year.
Let me just see.
They're your big statements you're making. Okay. I like it, but they're both they're kind of bolters, you'd have to say.
Carrigan and who was it? Fermor? They'll be in the squad. They'll be in the squad of 22 or whatever it is. That first game, they'll both be there. Come back to me. This is March 15th as we say that. All right, let's finish one more here. One more. Let's pull one out. One that doesn't contain an F word in it. And there's plenty of those here. Thoughts on Hamaso, trade or hold? Let's finish on this one for the Cowboys. We've spent some time talking about the Cowboys there. But Hammer, trade or hold? We spoke about him in the preseason, Hammer, being... centre wing eligible, but just doesn't have that consistency in his game as some of those other options there as well, like a Sloan maybe.
Yeah, with all due respect, I don't know why you'd have him in the first place. He just doesn't do it for me. He doesn't, unless he scores. His scoring is pretty bad. 34 the other day, I actually thought it would be lower, and he was kind of unlucky at the end with the try. That was him who scored, wasn't it? And then it was pulled back. So
but he was offside. That was his fault.
True. No, you're right. He could have, So I don't know. It could have been more, but just going forward, I don't know. The Cowboys can't say they're scoring a lot of points. So I wouldn't have Hammer.
Yeah, no, not for mine either. All right, let's leave it at that. If you want to find out our teams, as we say, our full teams for round 2, check those out on our Instagram at SuperCoach365. That's where you'll get us this week and every week throughout the rest of the season, 365 days a year even. Follow us there, subscribe to us on YouTube, thumbs up, rate, review, comment, wherever you're listening to us or viewing us. We much appreciate it. Tommy, big weekend of footy coming up, round 2. Can't wait to settle into the couch with a couple of these bad boys and get stuck into another week of footy.
Well, I always say it's darkest before the dawn, and last weekend was pretty dark for most super coaches, so hopefully round 2 is a lot more bright.
The brightest rainbow follows the darkest storm. Let's see some green arrows round 2. Tommy and Ryan, SuperCoach365 podcast. We'll chat to you next week. Enjoy your round 2 footy.